Have you ever noticed that there's a rare type of person who doesn't exist online? Like, at all. No Instagram, no Facebook, no TikTok. Maybe they have a LinkedIn for work, but that's it. And when you ask them why they're not on social media, they don't give you some long philosophical rant about how it's destroying society. They just shrug and say, I don't know. I just never got into it. And you're left thinking, wait, how is that even possible? How do you just not care about something that literally everyone else is obsessed with? Well, here's what's wild. Psychologists have actually studied these people, like really studied them. And what they found is fascinating because people who genuinely don't use social media aren't just randomly different. They have a specific psychological profile, specific traits that show up over and over. And once you understand what those traits are, you start to realize these people aren't missing out on something. They're protecting something. Something most of us gave away without even realizing it. But here's the thing that makes this interesting. If you're watching this video right now, you're obviously on social media. You're on YouTube. So this isn't about making you feel bad for scrolling or telling you to delete everything. This is about understanding what's actually happening in the brains of people who opted out completely. Whether you realize it or not, these people reveal something important about what social media does to the rest of us. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So here's the first trait that shows up in almost everyone who doesn't use social media. They have an unusually high tolerance for missing out. And I don't mean FOMO, the fear of missing out. I mean, they genuinely don't care if they miss things. Psychologists call this low social comparison orientation. Most of us are constantly measuring ourselves against other people. We see someone's vacation photos and we think, why am I not traveling more? We see someone's relationship and we think, why is my relationship not that good? We see someone's success and we think, why am I falling behind? Social media is basically a comparison machine running 24/7. But people who don't use it, they just don't run that program. They're not wired to constantly check where they stand relative to everyone else. I have a friend like this, and honestly, it used to confuse me so much. We'd be at dinner with a group, and someone would mention some drama happening online, or some viral thing everyone was talking about. And she'd just sit there with this completely blank look on her face. Not because she was trying to be cool or above it all. She genuinely had no idea what anyone was talking about. And instead of feeling embarrassed or left out, she'd just be like, oh, I don't know about that, and then change the subject. No apology, no explanation. Just total indifference to the fact that she missed the thing everyone else saw. And at first, I thought, that's so weird. But then I started paying attention to how she moved through life. She didn't check her phone every 5 minutes. She didn't know what was trending. She didn't care who was beefing with who. And because of that, she had this insane amount of mental space. Like her brain wasn't cluttered with 1,000 tiny pieces of information about people she didn't even know. She just existed in her own reality, completely unbothered by what was happening in everyone else's. Here's what research shows about this. Studies from the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found that people with high social comparison tendencies, which is most of us experience, way more anxiety and depression. Because we are constantly exposed to everyone's highlight reel, and our brain interprets that as evidence that we're falling behind. But people who don't engage in that comparison loop at all, they report significantly higher baseline contentment, not because their lives are better, but because they're not constantly measuring their lives against a curated version of someone else's. What? Yeah, it sounds simple, but it's actually a massive psychological advantage. They opted out of a competition most of us didn't even realize we entered. Second trait. People who don't use social media have what psychologists call high internal validation. They don't need external feedback to know if they're doing okay. Most of us post something, and then we check how many likes it got. We share an achievement, and we wait to see if people congratulate us. We need that external confirmation to feel like what we did mattered. It's not a character flaw. It's just how social media rewires your reward system. You get a hit of dopamine every time someone validates you. And over time, your brain starts to crave that validation. But people who never built that dependency, they validate themselves internally. They know if they did something good. They don't need a comment section to confirm it. I noticed this with someone I used to work with. He'd accomplished something legitimately impressive at work, And I'd say, dude, you should post about that. And he'd look at me like I suggested he shout it from a rooftop. He'd be like, why would I do that? And I realized for him, there was no impulse to broadcast achievements. He didn't need the audience. The accomplishment itself was enough. That's so foreign to most of us now. We've been conditioned to think if you didn't post it, did it even happen? But his brain never learned that equation. His sense of self-worth wasn't tied to external metrics at all. And honestly, that's a level of psychological freedom most of us will never experience because we've already wired our brains the other way. Here's the research on this. A study from Cyber Psychology Behavior and Social Networking Journal found that people who rely heavily on social media for self-esteem validation experience more fragile self-worth. Because if your value is tied to likes and comments, then every time a post underperforms, your brain interprets that as I'm not good enough. But people who never built that loop, their self-worth is stable. It doesn't fluctuate based on engagement metrics. They just are. And that stability is rare now. Like genuinely rare. Most of us are riding this emotional roller coaster based on how the internet responds to us on any given day. They're just not on the ride at all. Third trait, and this one's interesting. People who don't use social media tend to have fewer but deeper relationships. They're not trying to maintain 200 friendships. They have like 5 to 10 people they actually invest in. And those relationships are real, not performative, not maintained through likes and comments, actually real. Psychologists call this high relationship selectivity, and what it means is they're intentional about who gets their time and energy. They're not spreading themselves thin trying to keep up with everyone they've ever met. They're going deep with a small circle. I watched this happen with my cousin, who deleted all her social media about 3 years ago. Before that, she was constantly stressed about keeping up with people, commenting on everyone's stuff, remembering birthdays, maintaining all these surface-level friendships. When she left social media, I honestly thought she's going to lose touch with everyone. But what actually happened was the opposite. The people who mattered reached out directly. They texted, they called, they made plans. And the people who didn't, they just faded away. And she was completely fine with that. She told me I'd rather have 5 friends I actually talk to than 200 people I pretend to care about. And that hit me because I realized how much energy I was spending maintaining relationships that weren't even real. I was liking photos of people I hadn't spoken to in years. Why? Because social media makes you feel like you have to. But she just opted out of that obligation entirely. Research backs this up. Studies show that people with smaller, more intimate social networks report higher life satisfaction than people with large but shallow networks. Quality over quantity isn't just a cliche. It's actually how human connection is supposed to work. We're not designed to maintain meaningful relationships with hundreds of people, but social media convinced us we should try. People who never bought into that, they just kept their circles small and their connections deep, and they're psychologically healthier for it. Fourth trait, people who don't use social media have extremely strong boundaries around their privacy. Like they genuinely don't want strangers knowing their business. Most of us have been normalized to oversharing. We post where we are, what we're doing, who we're with, what we're thinking, what we're eating. We've given the entire internet access to our daily lives, and we don't even think about it anymore. But people who don't use social media, they still have that boundary intact. They see their life as private, not secret, just private, theirs, not content for public consumption. I had this conversation with someone once who said, I just don't understand why I would tell strangers about my vacation or my relationship or my opinions. And I was like, well, you're not telling strangers, you're telling your friends. And he said, but you're also telling strangers. Anyone can see it. Why would I want that? And I didn't have a good answer, because he was right. I'd been so conditioned to share everything that I forgot there's actually no good reason to broadcast your entire life. But his boundary was still there. He wasn't being paranoid or secretive. He just valued privacy in a way most of us don't anymore because we traded it for likes. Here's what's fascinating about this. Research from the Pew Research Center found that people who don't use social media report feeling significantly more in control of their personal information. Because they are. They're not worried about who's screenshotting their stories or what's being said about them in group chats or how they're being perceived by people they barely know. They removed themselves from that entire ecosystem. And the psychological relief that comes with that is massive. They don't have a digital reputation to manage, they just have a life. And that life is private. What a concept. The fifth trait, and this might be the most important one, people who don't use social media have an extremely high awareness of psychological manipulation. They see social media for what it is, a system designed to capture your attention and sell it to advertisers. And once you see it that way, it's really hard to participate. Most of us know this intellectually. We know we're being manipulated, but we use it anyway. We scroll knowing it's designed to be addictive. We post knowing we're feeding an algorithm. We engage knowing it's making us anxious. But we do it because everyone else is doing it. People who don't use it, they just decided that trade-off isn't worth it. They saw the manipulation and said no thanks. I know someone who worked in tech who explained social media to me once in a way that I'll never forget. He said these platforms are designed by the smartest engineers in the world to be as addictive as possible. Every feature, every notification, every algorithm tweak is meant to keep you coming back. And once I understood that I couldn't use it without feeling it, but I still use it, he doesn't. He said I'm not going to willingly participate in something designed to exploit my psychology. And I respect that so much because it takes a rare level of self-awareness to recognize you're being manipulated and then actually remove yourself from the situation. Most of us just stay and complain. Research shows that people who are aware of persuasive tactics are less susceptible to them. But awareness alone isn't enough. You have to act on it, and people who don't use social media acted. They recognized the game, and they refused to play. That's not superiority. That's just boundaries. They value their attention more than they value being connected to everyone all the time. And honestly, that might be the sanest position you can take in 2024. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. And this is something most people don't talk about. There's a difference between people who never started using social media and people who used it and then quit. The psychology is completely different. People who never started, they usually have naturally low social comparison tendencies and high internal validation from the beginning. It's just their personality. But people who quit, they went through a transformation. They recognized something wasn't working, and they chose to change it. That takes a different kind of strength. That's conscious rejection of something you were already dependent on. I had a friend who deleted everything after realizing she was checking Instagram like 40 times a day. She said I would pick up my phone without even thinking about it. I'd be waiting in line, and I'd just start scrolling. I'd be having a conversation, and I'd check my phone mid-sentence. And one day she was like, why do I do this? What am I even looking for? And she couldn't answer that question, so she deleted it all. And the first few weeks were brutal. She said she'd reach for her phone constantly out of pure habit. But after a month, something shifted. She stopped thinking about it, stopped caring what people were posting, stopped feeling like she was missing something. And now, 2 years later, she says it's one of the best decisions she ever made. Not because social media is evil, but because for her it was doing more harm than good. Psychologists call this digital minimalism. It's the practice of being intentional about your technology use instead of just defaulting to whatever everyone else is doing. And the people who commit to it report lower anxiety, higher focus, and better relationships. Not because they're superior humans, but because they removed a variable that was messing with their mental health. And here's your permission slip if you need one. You're allowed to opt out. You're allowed to delete apps that make you feel worse. You're allowed to choose privacy over visibility. You're allowed to have a life that isn't documented. None of that makes you weird or antisocial or out of touch. It just makes you someone who chose differently. Here's the reframe you need. People who don't use social media aren't missing out. They're opting out. And there's a massive difference, Teeks. Missing out implies they're losing something valuable. Opting out means they weighed the costs and benefits and decided it's not worth it. And honestly, when you look at the research on social media and mental health, they might be right. Studies consistently show that heavy social media use correlates with higher rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and poor self-esteem. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people. So, the people who looked at that data and said, yeah, I'm good, They're not weird, they're just protecting their mental health. Here at Psyclipsis, we don't just talk about psychology, we make it make sense. If this video made you think differently about your own social media use, hit subscribe because next week we're breaking down why some people overshare everything online and what that reveals about their psychology. Your future self, the one who's more intentional about where your attention goes, is already thanking you for watching this. You don't have to quit everything. You just have to be honest about what it's doing to you. And that awareness, that's where change starts. You've got this.